have to love yourself and show yourself kindness and grace.
Yeah.
And part of what it means to love yourself is to feed yourself nourishing foods and to love your body enough to aspire for it to be healthier.
Welcome. I'm Alyssa Nobrega, your host of the Healing and Human Potential podcast, a place for you to discover the multidimensionality of what it means to be human. Over the past 20 years, I've trained thousands of coaches in my methodology, leveraging my experience as a former psychotherapist, and I'm here to share with you all the wisdom and insights that I've learned along the way. Each week, I'll share with you life-changing tools to support you in awakening and manifesting your dream life from the inside out. We'll be exploring the intersection between ancient wisdom and modern everyday life, really diving deep into the art of human potential through the lens of psychology, spirituality, and coaching. Let's let the magic unfold. We have the honor of having Max Lugavere on the podcast today, who is a health and science journalist, filmmaker, podcast host, and best-selling author. His first book, Genius Foods, was a New York Times bestseller, and it changed our understanding of the diet's impact on brain health. He's a respected and well-known voice in the field, having been on the Joe Rogan Experience, the Today Show, the New York Times, and in People magazine, and I'm so excited to have him here with me today. So Max, take me back to the beginning. I would love to hear from you where and how you got started as a science and health journalist. Like, what inspired you to be such a prominent voice in this field?
Yeah, I mean, I never would have anticipated becoming a prominent voice. It was really something that emerged out of passion for health and nutrition, and personal tragedy. Really, my mom was diagnosed with a rare form of dementia really early on. She was about 58, and I had not had any kind of neurodegenerative disease in my family lineage that I was familiar with, at least. And so having had this lifelong passion for nutrition science and fitness and longevity, just, personal interests of mine that have had endured for as long as I, could remember. When my mom became sick, I sort of became the health oracle in my family of sorts. And I took it upon myself to look into the research and exploit my media credentials to start reaching out to people, scientists that could provide answers. Now, I'm not a medical doctor. I didn't go through the academic channels, but my career was as a journalist.
Yeah.
So when I graduated from college, I got a job working for Al Gore, and I worked for him for 6 years as one of the more prominent journalists, producers, and hosts for a TV network that he had in the US called Current TV. And so there I was a bit of a generalist, but when my mom became sick, I used those skills that I had gleaned, like in investigative journalism skills, to investigate why it was that my mom became sick.
Yeah.
And so as I would learn, as I would uncover new truths, I would share them on social media without any kind of intent for them to go viral or to garner a following of any kind. It was really just to help spread the word about what it was that I was uncovering. But I did start to realize very early on that I was not just fulfilling a need for people, that people were really interested in the things that I was posting, but also that they were interested in what I had to say about what I was posting. And that my sharing my perspective and my insights started to raise eyebrows among people that I actually had personally respected and looked up to, actual medical doctors and people with academic credentials. And so it kind of started to snowball, and one thing led to another. I started working on a documentary project. It's a film that we're actually super excited to release soon, called Little Empty Boxes. It's a documentary about my mom and dementia and prevention and all that stuff. But then I also had the opportunities to go on the Dr. Oz show and all this like major national media talking about nutrition.
Yeah.
Which was like just an incredible gift to get to do. And then a book deal arose and I worked my butt off on that, and that ended up doing really well. And so it all kind of worked really organically. And yeah, I guess now I get to say that I'm a prominent voice in the field, but it really started with just, it was very simple, in a really simplistic way. It was just a person trying to save his mom.
Yeah. Yeah. And how beautiful that you took that to actually make a difference and do the research to support her. Was she open to hearing some of what you were finding?
Yeah. I mean, the thing about dementia, and I learned this really early on, is that it begins in the brain decades often before the first symptom. And also, people live the way that they want to live ultimately.
Yeah.
And so I didn't go into my mom's life like a raging bull trying to uproot everything it was that she was eating and how she was living. And who knows if that would have even made an impact.
Yeah.
So it really, for me, it was about learning as much as I could so that I can arm myself to live by example and then to ultimately share it with anybody who might be interested.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I imagine that you discovered a lot of misconceptions around nutrition and probably have debunked them. Can you share some of what you found?
Yeah, I mean, we've been told for decades to eat a certain way. I mean, humans we forget that we're animals sometimes, and animals have innate intelligence. But, 50 or so years ago, humans were provided dietary guidelines, right, for the first time in the form of the dietary guidelines for Americans. And that was essentially when, we ate probably in accordance with what our traditional, or at least more aligned with what our traditional diets were. But then suddenly these guidelines come out, obviously highly influenced by the food industry. And now we're starting to see the pharmaceutical industry as well. But, 7 to 11 servings of grains a day was the base of the USDA food pyramid. And the food pyramid's been retired at this point. What it's been replaced with is arguably not that much better, but that's the kind of paradigm that I grew up with. I mean, my mom was a very health conscious woman, but she wasn't a nutrition expert by any means. And we didn't have the internet, growing up. So my mom just ate in accordance with what the dietary kind of dogma of the day was, which was that food pyramid. If it had a Red Heart Healthy logo on it in the grocery store, chances are it passed through my kitchen at one point or another.
And
so,
we kind of grew up on like processed foods, maybe the first generation. I mean, with Pop-Tarts and Bagel Bites and all this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're still figuring out how that's played an effect on our longevity and our health and well-being.
100%.
But so you have found some things that have been debunked in the nutrition field specifically.
Yeah. I mean, this whole idea that fat is bad, that fat makes us fat. I mean, that's totally not true. We need fat to survive and thrive. And fat is not a monolith. Like there are different kinds of fats, and some fats have differing effects than others. So there's that. And then, but like the pendulum always swings. It goes from one side to the other side. And then, with the welcoming back of fat to the table, the low carb movement really has kind of seeded, I think, the public sphere with a lot of misinformation as well. Namely that if some fat is good, more fat is better. And so you have a lot of people in the low carb community now just like pouring coconut oil all over their food, butter in their smoothies, and who knows what, which fine, if you enjoy it, that's all good. But yeah, there's always going to be misinformation, I think, in the nutrition sphere. And so for me, it's one of the things I'm very passionate about is helping people separate fact from fiction. Yeah.
And how do you navigate that for yourself? Through research?
Yeah. I mean, I love to do, I do research in the sense that I'm constantly plugged into PubMed and also scanning almost religiously the press releases that emerge from our universities, because they always get, that's kind of a good way to get a sense of what's like new, like the latest and greatest. But then I also talk to experts. I have my own podcast called The Genius Life, and I talk to people that I really admire, not just PhDs and MDs though. I talk to anybody who I think is smart, intelligent, has something to offer, because I myself am not a PhD and a medical doctor. And we live in a new world where, I don't believe, and this is probably controversial and people will debate this, but you don't have to have gone through those channels to be able to offer something of value in the sciences.
And to come back to your own body and to listen to your body and to trust your own scientific experiment of what works for you and what doesn't, because we're all designed differently.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Science is a method. It's like, it's a method of investigation. It's not, nobody owns it, So yeah, and then my own personal experimentation, talking to people. And then also at this point, my work has reached I think a degree of critical mass where I get feedback from thousands of people all around the world that follow not just my books, but as my own views evolve over time, they kind of integrate, my changing views on nutrition as the science continues to evolve, as my own perspective evolves. And I get real-time feedback in a way that almost like a clinician. I mean, I'm not a clinician, but it's kind of wild.
Yeah. And so what have you found with foods that specifically help brain health, optimal functioning, memory? Are there certain foods that you've discovered, or what is some of the feedback that you're getting from people that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people just have fear around certain foods.
Yeah.
This is a big problem. I think.
What kind of foods? Like milk?
Yeah.
A lot of meat.
Dairy.
Yeah. And there's dairy in different
products.
countries, right?
Yeah.
And so that matters how it's processed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Meat, eating a lot of meat.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a carnivore, but I think that there is a lot of misinformation out there regarding animal source foods. And there's a ton of value in plant foods as well, but you don't see the pressure from our trusted institutions, whether it's like the government or our food industry, there's this push towards plant-based diets, right? And so I think if there's anything I could do, like most people, unless you're in one of these like carnivore echo chambers, most people know that fruits and vegetables are good for you.
Yeah.
Like most people, like I think if you probably were to take a random sampling on the street, most people would say that fruits and vegetables are good for you and acknowledge that. But a lot of people think that animal source products are inherently unhealthy.
And your mom was a vegetarian, right?
My mom was largely vegetarian. Yeah. So I think that one of the more, I think, important public services that I can provide is to help dispel that fear, because I mean, these are some of our most nutrient dense foods. And typically an animal source food is going to be a vastly better option for dinner than some boxed vegan mac and cheese or what have you, and they're actually very healthy. It's not like they're a healthier alternative. They're actually they can be very healthy. Grass-fed, grass-finished lean beef is an amazing food. Wild fatty fish, amazing foods, even chicken breast. Like, we live in a time of widespread obesity, widespread metabolic dysfunction.
Yeah.
And so these are incredibly important foods.
I heard you say a statistics about Americans, how many people are obese. What was that?
Yeah. So today about 1 in 2 Americans are obese.
Wow.
Yeah. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting there.
Yeah. And I'm all about like loving the body that you're in and coming into full acceptance and gratitude for this amazing vehicle that is a body, and still making change to feel healthy and most optimal so that we live longer, healthier, happier, right? So I know that you've been doing some work around fat and just supporting people and understanding how they can hack their bodies. Would you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I personally went on a bit of like a fat loss journey over the past couple of months where I wanted to see what it was like to lose.
Which you are in no way obese at all.
Yeah, no,
Super
I wasn't
fit.
obese. I wasn't obese.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a closet meathead. So for me, it was a bro endeavor.
Okay.
To shed a few body fat percentage points.
Okay.
It was actually purely it was a challenge that I wanted to adopt, and it was kind of like an aesthetic challenge.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot about in so doing. I mean, I don't just kind of jump into things from a health standpoint without doing like tons and tons of research. It's just not who I am.
Yeah.
So, so I did in the process learn a lot about fat loss and so, yeah, I mean, we live in a time where people are really struggling with being overweight. And it's like, if your biomarkers are out of whack, a lot of people now are obsessed with their blood sugar curves, whether it's blood sugar, blood pressure, lipids, things like that. If you're overweight, I mean, the number one thing that you can do is lose weight. Like we're not even talking about eat this, not that. It's like, you just have to lose weight.
Yeah.
95% of the health benefit that you'll see will come from that weight loss. And so when it comes to, and it's not just weight, you want to lose fat, obviously. You don't want to lose muscle. And so when it comes to losing fat, dropping the fat, I mean, I learned a lot. For example, the value of dietary protein. It's the most satiating macronutrient. And so if you're hungry, prioritize protein. It's almost impossible to eat too much protein because it's so self-limiting. And so yeah, so I adopted a very high protein diet. It was like I was getting 1 gram of protein per pound of my body weight.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, I mean, that does multiple things. One, it helps to tamper down your hunger signals.
Hmm.
Two, it helps to maintain your lean mass when you're in a calorie deficit, which is to lose fat, you have to be in a calorie deficit. You have to, which essentially means you have to be burning more calories on a 24-hour period than you are ingesting.
Yeah.
But when you're in a calorie deficit, that's essentially what's called a catabolic state. Your body is breaking down tissue. And by optimizing the amount of protein that you're consuming, you're basically telling your body, and of course you have to resistance train as well. That's another really important part of the puzzle. But you're telling your body, we need to hold on to the muscle. Let's get rid of the fat.
Hmm.
And so if more people knew that, I think that would be a game changer.
Yeah. Yeah. Imagine having a fulfilling career doing what you love, working from anywhere in the world, setting your own hours while making good money and a big impact. If that lights you up, then I'm super excited to share with you today's sponsor, the Institute for Coaching Mastery. This is my robust, accredited year-long certification program for newer seasoned coaches, therapists, leaders, and those just looking to up-level their life in a profound way. We have an amazing community of students from all around the world who have really started their journey to expand with us both personally and professionally. And this experience is designed to give you the 3 things that you need to thrive. So first, you have all of the tools and support you need to move past what's been holding you back so that you can completely change the trajectory of your life. And then you learn how to masterfully and confidently facilitate transformation with your clients or your team, regardless of your niche. If you want to do health, business, relationship, or you just have no idea yet, we hold your hand through that. And then lastly, you'll receive my 6-figure and beyond signature roadmap that's customizable to meet you wherever you are. So whether you want to do high ticket sales, online marketing, or you just want to hit 6 figures without ever needing to go on social media, we've got you covered. And this truly is the most rewarding work in the world. We have new students now who have a waitlist of dream clients in under a year. We also have seasoned students who are doing $80,000 months. And this is really about creating lasting transformation from the inside out so that you can share your gifts and serve the world in all the ways that you're called to. And I've seen firsthand the power of what happens when you have the community to collaborate with, but you also have the right tools and resources to really thrive. And so whether you want to do your own personal development, you're wanting to become a coach, or you're just looking for a cutting edge approach to really grow your business, the Institute for Coaching Mastery is for you. You are held every single step of the way. And so if you want to get behind the scenes access to the Institute with 3 proven transformational tools for free to help you create the business and life you love, all you have to do is go to alyssanobriga.com/tools, or you can find us at alyssanobriga.com/apply now to see all the details and apply today. And what do you think about intermittent fasting?
Intermittent fasting is a great tool. It's a form of calorie restriction, primarily. Secondarily, there is some research showing that by eating earlier dinners, what they're calling in the literature early time restricted feeding, that there are some benefits like improved blood sugar regulation, blood pressure regulation. Next day hunger seems to be better when we eat earlier dinners as opposed to like a late night dinner.
Yeah.
So there are all these benefits, but by and large, the most important variable is what you're eating. When you're eating matters as well.
Yeah.
But it's sort of like, if I had to kind of throw a proportion onto it, it would be like 80% what you're eating, 20% what you're eating.
Okay. And so you're saying higher protein.
Yeah.
And I imagine less processed.
Yeah. I mean, processed foods tend to be low in protein. They tend to be protein dilute because protein is the most expensive not only is it the most satiating, but it's the most expensive macronutrient to produce. So one characteristic that typifies most, if not all, ultra-processed junk foods, like vending machine foods, is that they tend to be some combination of carbs and fat. They tend to be pretty low in protein. And that's one of the reasons why we tend to overconsume them, because they're not satiating. They have that hyper-palatable characteristic where they're just so delicious. They're not satiating at all. They're highly calorie dense. And so those processed foods tend to make up, they're at the foundation of the obesity epidemic.
Yeah.
Conversely, high protein foods like meat, fish, eggs, legumes, or soy products if you're on a plant-based diet, like tofu and the like, all tend to be high protein, and those foods tend to be the most satiating.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's like impossible to have you ever like overeaten chicken breast? It just doesn't happen.
Yeah. You get full and you
Yeah.
stop. Yeah. And so I imagine people are hearing this, and in my line of work as a former somatic psychotherapist, I loved discovering about how people create change and why they don't, and also in my work as a coach. And so what I found is that we can know certain things, but we don't actually create the change. And so a lot of the work I've done is how our inner world reflects and our behaviors and choices that we make in the world. And so why I think people don't make change, because they could be hearing something like this and then not do what they know that would be healthy or right for them. And part of the work that I found is that sometimes people consciously, they say they want to lose weight, but then unconsciously they have a fear about it. And unconsciously we run our lives 95% based on our unconscious. And so, for example, I had a woman come to see me, and I don't usually do weight work or body stuff, but she said her doctor said she was overweight and she wanted to lose weight. And she's like, I'm getting up, was thinking she needed more motivation and willpower. And my approach has changed from the inside out. So you got to get out of your own way. And I was like, what do you fear would happen if you lost the weight? And she's like, Alyssa, I don't fear anything. Like, I want to lose the weight. And I said, slow down, get mindful. If you lose the weight you fear. And she just started crying. And she was sharing with me about some sexual abuse that happened when she was younger.
Wow.
And she was afraid that if she lost the weight, then she would be attractive to men again. And she didn't want to be a target. So the weight was protecting her. And so sometimes this work is not about pushing harder. It's about getting out of our own way or seeing what the weight is there, how it's trying to serve us, and then taking some of this practical information into our lives.
Wow.
And so I think being compassionate with ourselves and asking deep questions can support us in creating those changes. But I also know that food, sometimes people are using food, myself included. I started emotionally overeating because I was doing some really deep work within myself, and I was eating, it's like chips, or that was my thing. It was like salty or savory. So I would go to chips and I would emotionally overeat. And I started to learn the tools to help me be with my emotions. So I wasn't going towards food to do that. And I know a lot of people can, if they don't, we don't learn how to be with our emotions in school. So Of course we just model what we've seen or what's available. And there's a dopamine hit and some of this sugar and some of the other things that come up. So one thing that I did that was really helpful for me, I'll share with people, if anybody has emotional overeating, is what I did was when I wanted to emotionally overeat, I made myself a commitment for 1 month to just, instead of eating, take a pause. And I took out a piece of paper and I wrote down my emotions. It's called freeform writing. And it's at least 10 minutes of writing, but whenever it feels complete. Once I got the emotion out, rather than eating chips, because, I don't know if you emotionally overeat, but you eat really fast. It's almost like your ego doesn't want to wake up. So you try to just get the chips in really quickly. I don't know. It sounds like maybe it's more of a feminine thing. I'm not sure.
Maybe. I eat when I'm bored.
Okay.
I do that
there's that.
Bored,
yeah. No. This is a little bit different. This was like, I was trying to get my needs met in a different way.
Wow.
And so after I would journal write for a minimum of 10 minutes, and I would write over one page so you don't reread it. It's like taking out the trash. It's just garbage. You rip it up, and let it go. And then I would offer myself compassion, because what I noticed was if I judged myself and I got into guilt, it would loop into more emotionally overeating. And so when I offered myself, I did this process from University of Santa Monica. I forgive myself for whatever the judgment is, the truth is. So like, I forgive myself for buying into the misunderstanding that I shouldn't have eaten that. The truth is that was the best I knew how to take care of myself, and I'm learning new tools now. And so I would do like maybe 5 or 10 rounds of compassion. And that helped me get out of the right-wrong dynamic of I shouldn't eat that, I should eat this. And that's what was having me loop. And so by being compassionate helped me get my needs met. And then I made a choice that if I wanted to have the chips, it was totally fine to have the chips, but to slow down and eat it with presence. And if I did that, then I didn't make it wrong that I ate the chips, and I didn't make it right if I didn't eat them, because that right-wrong dynamic helped me actually loop in the pattern.
Wow.
And that can be true for a lot of addictive patterns for people, just as a hack to try out for themselves. But I want people to know that you have such brilliant takeaways and hacks for people. And I also want them to know that, like, if there are emotional patterns or something that's coming up for them, do the inner work, and then the outer change is a lot easier to be sustainable with.
Yeah, 100%. You have to love yourself.
Yeah.
And show yourself kindness and grace.
Yeah.
And part of what I think what it means to love yourself is to feed yourself nourishing foods
Yeah.
and to love your body enough to aspire for it to be healthier
More
and
optimal.
and more optimal. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that one thing that was also helpful for me was getting out of an environment with all of the triggers. So if I had a roommate that had food like that, or if I had bought it and put it in my kitchen, it would be harder for me to create that environment. So like one of the first things that was helpful was removing those environments or making sure that I didn't have that food easily accessible
Yeah.
for a period of time. And then yes, doing the deeper work to really love ourselves enough to start showing up and being compassionate wherever we are in the journey.
Yeah. No, those are great hacks. I mean, I get sent a lot of food products at this point just because of the nature of my work. And if left to my own devices, if I'm bored working from home one day and I go into my cupboards, I mean, there is a ton of trouble waiting for me in my cupboards at this point. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm human just like anybody else. But one hack is to just, first of all, keep it out of the line of sight.
Yeah.
Just something as simple as that can make the difference between picking up something that you're not necessarily even really hungry for. It's just one of these like boredom impulse decisions. And then also, I mean, for me, like, you know, when I go shopping to the supermarket, which I do all the time because I actually love grocery shopping. I know that if it's in my shopping cart, it's as good as in my stomach, you know, and that if I bring something home like a bag of chips or a pint of ice cream, these are foods that they're not designed to be consumed in moderation. When we have that experience, which I know everybody has, I have, when you go to the freezer and you take out the pint of ice cream intending only to have a spoonful and you end up, before you know it, looking at the bottom of the pint.
Yeah.
We tend to think, oh my God, I failed. How is my willpower so crappy that I couldn't control myself? But that's how you've evolved.
Yeah.
Like your biology wants you to, something that's so calorie dense would have been life-saving to one of our hunter-gatherer ancestors prior to the food scarcity issue being solved, which we solved, and now we're in a state of food abundance, obviously, all the time. But yeah, keeping it out, you know, knowing what my trigger foods are and then keeping them out of my house, I think is a really good hack. Another thing that I've found to be helpful for me, this is one of I think the greatest biohacking technologies that anybody could have in their kitchen. It's a digital food scale. People with unhealthy relationships with food, I don't know if this is necessarily the right recommendation for them, but I found for me personally that being able to identify what a serving is to me is very helpful. When you take out a bag of something or a pint of something that has 4, 5, 6, 8 servings in it, I like to know what an actual serving is.
Yeah.
And there's no better way to be able to identify that as clear as day on a digital food scale, which is super helpful.
Yeah.
Volume is not as accurate. Volume can lie because foods are, you know, they're packaged according to weight, not volume. And so a really accurate digital food scale to me that weighs by the gram, which is how we tend to label foods here in the United States.
Yeah, they don't make it easy.
Super helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I get so much use out of this little $16 food scale.
That's great.
In my kitchen.
Yeah.
I mean, even something like pasta. Like I eat occasionally, you know, like these legume pastas are super great, right? But like a box has 8 servings and you never know like how much is a serving, right? I like to know that I'm eating a serving or 2. Maybe I want 2 servings.
Yeah.
All good.
Yeah.
But how else would you know without weighing it out?
Yeah.
To me, it's just so intuitive.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to bring up was this mind-body connection, right? Because when I was getting licensed as a somatic psychotherapist, I really started discovering how the body is the unconscious and that it can store trauma and memories, and oftentimes we're not even aware of it. And a fascinating story I'll share is that when I got my first master's degree, I went and traveled the world afterwards. I was like, I'm free, and went to India. My GI got so messed up when I was in India. As soon as I got to Thailand, by the way, I'm going to share my own hack is grapefruit seed extract. If you ever go to a third world country and you want to make sure that you are eating, this is like, I don't know if it's a natural antibiotic. I'm not sure what it is, but GSE, grapefruit seed extract, I have it with every meal. and I no longer get parasites or sick.
Whoa.
So that is a fun plug. I just went to Bali and I had it with every single meal and I was totally fine. I've even had it in Bhutan, eating with people from the floor, and I'm very sensitive GI tract. I did not get sick.
It's a pill?
It's a pill. You don't take the liquid. It tastes disgusting. But GSE, anytime you travel, every meal.
Good to know.
Easy. Yes. So I didn't know that when I first went to India. And I got sick for like 10 years. It really messed up my GI. But as soon as I got to Thailand, I was like, I'm booking myself in a cleanse. And it had 2 colonics a day. And I was doing a lot of mindfulness and meditation at the time. So when I was getting the colonic done, maybe too much information, but when I was getting the colonic done, I was just present with what my experience. I was using it as a meditation. And I would have vivid memories and like scents and boyfriends and like foods that I was eating at different periods of my life. The only reason why I figured this out was because Jack in a Box came up in my awareness. I haven't eaten Jack in a Box since I was in high school. And a boyfriend that I was dating at the same time came up in my awareness at the same time. I discovered that I was literally detoxing different times of my life as it was going through my GI tract in sequential order, literally clearing out my past. And not too long afterwards, I ended up finding my husband Emilio and getting together. So who knows the connection, but I do know that I was literally going through my GI. And I know you talk a lot about gut health and what we eat and how that affects our cognitive health. I know it's a different angle, but I'm fascinated with gut health. And I think that this is really so powerful for more that we're going to discover in terms of optimal health. Can you share a little bit about cognitive health and gut health and the correlation with nutrition?
Yeah. Wow. It's so funny you're asking because I was interviewed by the Wall Street Journal today and they asked me the same question about gut health. And how it relates to brain health. So the gut is basically, much has been made of the gut microbiome, which is like the universe of microorganisms that lives primarily in our large intestine, the colon. But we are very much at the very, very, very tip of the iceberg in terms of understanding the full role that it plays in our health, let alone brain health. And so much has been made online. There's a lot of people, making suggestions and recommendations about how to optimize gut health, optimize the microbiome. We don't know what a perfect microbiome looks like. We kind of have a sense. We think we know that it's generally a diverse array of species. A lot of alpha diversity is what it's called. But we don't know. We don't know. We think we know, but we're barely scratching the surface. But, people that tend to live a long time, they tend to eat a diverse array of plant fibers, which we know fiber helps to fortify gut microbiota because fiber is essentially a form of carbohydrate that passes through our small intestine, which is at the top of the GI tract after the stomach, which is where we absorb the nutrients, right, that we need to survive and thrive. And then those fibers end up in the large intestine where they get fermented by gut bacteria. Now, there are a number of different avenues by which microbiota in our guts can influence brain health. One major way is that our immune systems are primed to really focus on what's going on in the gut. And this is because our gut is our largest interface with the environment. We might think it's our skin because our skin is on the outside, right? It's an external barrier. But actually, if you were to take out your alimentary canal, which starts at your mouth and ends at your butt, and spread it out like over the floor somehow, it would take up the square footage of a small studio apartment. So it's a massive interface. And what you eat is not yet a part of you. It's still what's in your gut lumen is still considered a part of your environment. And so it's a massive point of entry, right, for pathogens potentially. And so your immune system is like hyper-focused. 80% of your immune system is poised to focus on what's going on in your gut. And your immune system is what's responsible for the phenomena that we call inflammation. And so it can modulate in no small way systemic inflammation. So if you have, a disturbance in your gut, that could theoretically, create an inflammatory effect in your body that can affect brain function.
Yeah.
The brain is always tapped into what's going on down below. And in fact, when animals are under inflammatory duress, they exhibit what are called sickness behaviors. So they retreat from the herd. Their grooming declines. Their appetite declines. They don't, they're not as interested in reproduction. And so these are actually behaviors in an animal that in a human look a lot like depression.
Mm.
And so that's sort of like one axis. Another axis is that, or another way that the gut can influence the brain is that, a lot of these compounds that we eat in plants, whether we're talking fibers or various phytochemicals like polyphenols, they get essentially consumed by microorganisms, which spit out essentially, or poop out, if you want to think of it that way, what are called postbiotic compounds. Short chain fatty acids, there are innumerable compounds, it's like you can't even, to name one would be futile, because we essentially are carrying around with us at any given time this like drug factory in our large intestine. And so those postbiotic chemicals actually can enter circulation quite easily and affect the brain.
With like leaky gut.
Not just leaky gut, but we absorb water in the large intestine and other compounds that are secreted by these microorganisms, short chain fatty acids like butyrate.
Okay.
So this isn't even leaky gut. This is just like, this is how we've evolved, right? We have this fact, they're essentially paying rent. So, they live there, right? So they return the favor by way of some of these really interesting postbiotic compounds like butyrate, which is this anti-inflammatory short chain fatty acid. It's associated with lower levels of inflammation, boosting levels of BDNF, which is this sort of miracle grow protein in the brain. So there's all these different like kind of entry points, but we're now starting to see that like it's in a small handful of clinical trials, various probiotics are able to influence cognitive function, mental states like mood and things like that. It's now being thought that Parkinson's disease may begin in the gut, via some microbial interaction that then is able to travel up the vagus nerve to the brain. And again, there are no like real concrete answers here, but because it's still it's so early for this kind of research. But what we do think we know so far about how to support gut health is to eat a diverse array of plant fibers, and everybody's fiber needs are going to be different. To, opt for organic if possible. It's not a huge deal, but organic is, some of these herbicides that they use can disrupt various aspects of like these, the microbial ecosystem.
But having like lots of color on your plate, right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, color is important, not necessarily from the standpoint of like gut microbes, but just because colors in produce are usually there due to the presence of compounds like carotenoids, which have a different effect. Like they actually like can boost brain function and help support healthy like neuronal cell membranes, like two in particular, lutein and zeaxanthin, we know are really good for carotenoids that are really good for eye health. They can help prevent age-related macular degeneration.
Great.
And we're now starting to see that those same compounds accumulate in the brain and can protect against oxidative stress and boost neural efficiency and things like that. Another plant pigment or category of pigments called anthocyanins also have been shown to be really supportive of memory function. And those are the blue pigments that you see in blueberries, red onions, and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of like why Eat the Rainbow is such a great like little heuristic, 'cause there's all the different colors are there due to some interesting, plant compound that, most of which we expect to have a benefit on human health.
Kind of take the best of all of it.
Yeah. Dietary diversity, right? It's like, it's just super, I think, important. The more you expose yourself to different plant compounds and, it's like the more resilient you become, the more resilient your gut microbiome becomes.
Yeah.
That's kind of the thinking there.
Yeah.
As well.
So what you were saying, what we do know about gut and taking care of your gut is what else?
You generally want to eat a diverse array of plant fibers. The artificial sweetener thing is a little bit unclear. Artificial sweeteners in general are not good for the gut microbiome, but we know the reason why we believe this to be true is due to animal studies where they use massive doses of these compounds. So I think a little bit here and there probably okay. I personally avoid artificial sweeteners.
When I went to India, I had candida and I didn't know it. And I was just walking around with a stevia bottle. And I think that messed up my hormones. I don't know that to be a complete scientific fact, but I was eating stevia with everything because I was trying to not have sugar, which would feed the candida. And it was a mess. But
Yeah.
it really did make bigger impacts on my health than I was aware of.
Yeah. I mean, there's very little. There's actually probably more research on artificial sweeteners, to be fair, than on stevia, just because there's more money, to research the artificial sweeteners, which have been adopted by soda companies and the junk food industry at large. But generally, I think it's probably smart to avoid artificial sweeteners, to avoid synthetic emulsifiers that can strip the gut of its mucosal lining, which we know is really important. There's probably some benefit of intermittent fasting to the gut microbiota. When we don't eat essentially overnight, and I think for about 4 hours, even if we do so in the middle of the day, something called the migrating motor complex becomes active, which helps to sweep the small intestine.
Oh, interesting.
Of debris and bacteria. So it can help. I mean, it's one of the mechanisms that our bodies will utilize to prevent SIBO, like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth.
And just to give your digestion a break.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exercise has been shown to support independently the gut microbiome.
Do we know any 30 minutes or any type of feedback about?
No,
okay.
Can't really make a recommendation.
Yeah.
But I mean, just,
move your body.
Move your body. Yeah. Fermented foods also.
Okay.
Fermented foods are super important. Like, and chocolate's a fermented food.
Dark chocolate?
Dark chocolate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Say more about dark chocolate and the benefits.
Yeah.
I want to hear it personally.
Well, people have this idea that fermented foods are probiotic, but they're not necessarily. You can have a fermented food that doesn't contain probiotics. But all probiotic containing foods are fermented generally.
Do you take probiotics, or do you try to get it from your food, or both?
I don't take probiotics unless for a very specific purpose.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because I know there's so many types of probiotics. So, I know to change it up.
Yeah. There are some interesting strains. Some strains have been studied and been shown to help support like mood, and to help reduce anxiety. So when I'm feeling anxious, I might acutely dose myself with like one of those strains.
Interesting.
Off the top of my head, I can't remember, but I work with a company called Just Thrive that makes like this like really interesting. They've taken this strain that's been studied. There's clinical research on it, and they've isolated it, packaged it with a bunch of other, like brain-related nutraceuticals, vitamin B12 and the like. And so I remember like I had a big podcast interview that I was going to do, and I was like a little anxious about it. And so I started taking some of those, and I don't know. I mean, it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
But maybe it helped. But on a regular basis, I don't take anything like that. But I do try to eat fermented foods whenever I can.
Yeah.
Kimchi, I'm a huge fan of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, and I know we have a mutual best friend that's a couple, Sarah and Craig, and we've been on, I don't know, over like 10 vacations together or so at this point. And I always see you've got your routine dialed in, like both travel, and I know you're super busy. So I would love to hear your daily or weekly routine just to stay optimal and healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a creature of habit. I like to wake up. I don't have like some crazy morning routine where I'm doing 1,500 things. I think that's a big problem in the wellness world. I've heard it described as holistic derangement syndrome. I wake up and I try to expose my eyes to my big open window, or not necessarily open, through glass. It's fine. But just to basically get that bright morning ambient light into my eyes. That to me is kind of a non-negotiable. But you don't have to stand in front of the window for 30 minutes. I mean, it's just like, for a few seconds, I see the benefit just from, going about my, making my bed with the blinds up is enough to, I feel like, activate my brain. I go downstairs, I drink some water. Sometimes I'll put various things in my water, but none of these are non-negotiables. Like occasionally I'll put in a few drops of iodine, maybe some chlorophyll because I enjoy it, trace minerals, some sea salt, I think that helps to hydrate me and I feel good as a result. And then right after that, I'm drinking coffee. Just like generally, most days I'll do black cold brew. These days, some days I'll add some heavy cream to it. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And then I eat something about an hour after I wake up. Lately, I've been enjoying morning workouts, and to fuel my workouts, my first meal of the day is going to be a big bolus of carbohydrate of protein and carbs because I'm going to the gym right after that. And so a lot of people are afraid of carbohydrates, and I think carbs are an amazing fuel to propel you through a vigorous workout. And I've been really leaning on them, and I've seen incredible gains. I mean, I probably have had a bias for low carb. I've had kind of like a low carb bias for quite some time, and I probably even still eat way fewer carbohydrates than your average American. But it's really dawned on me, especially over the past 2 years, that they're an almost indispensable exercise fuel, like a performance enhancing tool that should be utilized. And so I eat protein, I'm getting my carbohydrates.
You go to the gym?
I go to the gym. Yeah. I hit the weights like really hard. Lifting really intensely. I think it's really important for guys and girls, but particularly girls is a message that I think is really important for women to lift heavy,
Why?
Because it's what sends your muscles the stimulus to grow. And women, it's like, I think this is starting to change, but women are afraid of like getting bulky.
Yeah.
You have to like work out for a
All the
lifetime
time.
and have the testosterone of a man to get bulky. It's just not gonna, it doesn't happen, right?
It's a consistent, heavy weights. Yeah. Reps.
But the gym that I go to, women show up wearing makeup, and it's like for their first set to their last set, they've got their cute faces on. And I'm like, when I'm lifting, maybe during my warm-up set, I've got my composure, but by the end, I'm like, I've slowed down. I'm like, making all kinds of and that's what it should look like to lift weights. Because otherwise I've heard it described. I had Stan Efferding on my podcast, who's the world's strongest bodybuilder. No big deal. He's like a bodybuilder who also happens to be like this record-holding powerlifter. And he made this interesting distinction between exercise and training. Which is an interesting way to think about it. If you're just, trying to move your body and lift weights, you're exercising, right? But you're not really sending any kind of meaningful stimulus to your body to adapt. Just like maybe moving your body, moving some lymph fluid around. But if you're not, it's called progressive overload. If you're not progressively overloading your body, you're not going to see a difference.
Yeah.
And
you got to change it up anyway,
like
right?
if you want your butt to grow,
and
you're doing squats, but you're not like really intensely like getting to the point of like almost like failure, at least on the last set, then you're leaving a lot on the table. You're leaving a lot of money on the table.
Okay. Yeah. I challenge people to try this, to test it out for themselves and see.
Lift freaking heavy.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, the rep range is flexible. Like now we know that you can, the hypertrophic, meaning like muscular, the muscle growing anabolic stimulus occurs over a pretty wide rep range, low reps, high reps, but provided you train with intensity, like to failure. It doesn't, every set doesn't have to be to failure.
Okay.
But it should be within 1 or 2 or 3 reps.
Okay. So heavy lifting, gym.
Heavy lifting, gym.
What else?
Afterwards, generally I'm trying to eat another big protein bolus. I'm trying to get about 180 grams of protein a day. I probably, could get by with a little bit less than that.
What is because of your weight ratio?
Yeah.
Okay.
You generally want 1.6 grams per, assuming you're weight training, 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight.
Okay.
In pounds, that's about 0.7 to 0.8 grams per pound. So I'm about 180 pounds. So I should be getting, 150, 160 grams of protein every day. That's basically what I aim for. I end up usually coming in a little bit higher than that. But if you do that math for yourself and you figure it out, say you need 150 grams of protein a day and you enjoy eating 3 times a day, then you've got to be getting 50 grams of protein at each meal.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, well, you could do less. You could do 30, but then, have two snacks, 2 high protein snacks,
Okay.
in between.
Yeah.
But hitting that protein threshold it's important. It's not quite as important as doing the exercise itself.
Yeah.
But if you're putting in the effort in the gym, you should be, like the protein's going to help you optimize the recovery, the gains that you see as a result.
Yeah, exercise is so helpful, right? And I saw something on your Instagram about exercise. What was that?
Yeah, this thing went viral. I posted it yesterday that they found observational studies, so correlation doesn't equal causation, but like it was just 2 minutes of exercise a day was enough to reduce cancer risk for all cancers by 20%.
That's incredible. So just like even a walk, just like moving your body.
Just moving your body.
Yeah.
Well, and deliberate exercise, so vigorous exercise was what this study found. So you have to like be making an effort to exercise. And
we all have 2 minutes a day.
We all have 2 minutes a day. Yeah. I mean, I don't want people to get lazy and think all they should be doing is 2 minutes a day, but because there was a dose effect. The more they exercise, the lower the risk.
Interesting.
And that study fits within the broader body of evidence, which like exercise is just, it is the number one age defying, longevity promoting intervention that we can all pretty much do.
Yeah. Don't use it. You lose it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So I hear in terms of like food though, we went to breakfast. What about lunch, dinner? I understand like the protein, but what are when we were traveling, we went to one of our trips and you had like beef jerky and just practical things that people can have. I'm always like, do I take a hard boiled egg? Like what are some practical things that even when you're just out and busy that you can stay healthy without going to the, just like,
the
7-Eleven, the vending machine, 7-Eleven. Yeah.
Yeah. I love to travel with snacks. I'm always bringing beef jerky with me.
Yeah.
I try to find the lowest sugar beef jerky I can. Biltong is a great option. It's a South American form of beef jerky. There's usually no sugar added. Did I say South American? It's South African. Yeah. And whole fruit. I'm a huge fan of whole fruit. It's very satiating. It's self-limiting. I avoid dried fruit. But whole fruit is incredible.
Okay, yeah, because of the sugar with dry fruit.
Yeah, it's just like it's dehydrated, so it's not as satiating. So you lose some of that satiety effect, and it's just concentrated sugar. So it's like it's less satiating. It's more palatable because of the concentration of the sugar. So it really is. It's a food that you generally want to avoid. Or at least eat in strict moderation. If you're trying to watch your weight, it's like really easy to overeat dried fruit. There's a lot of really healthy, quote unquote, healthy foods that can promote weight gain if you're not careful. Like nuts are an incredibly healthy food, and they're actually a lot less, quote unquote, fattening than I think most people would expect them to be.
They're not that satiating for me. I feel like I can eat so many almonds and I'm not full.
Yeah,
it's very interesting. Whereas an avocado, I feel much more full.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
Yeah, nuts are an interesting category of foods. They're not as fattening as you would think based on their calorie count, and the newer research is actually showing us that about 30% of the calories in nuts we don't even absorb because of the whole food matrix. They just pass through us. Yeah,
interesting.
So nuts are a great food, but they're still a very calorie dense food, and they're very, especially when you add salt to them, very hard to moderate your consumption of them. So those are another food that I really like to like weigh out or buy in single serving packs.
Yeah.
Because it increases the friction where I'll happily eat one serving, but it's like there's a barrier for me to go and eat two.
Yeah. Yeah. And also just sprouted almonds or things like that. So it's not so hard on your digestion and breaking it down.
Yeah. People tend to respond well to sprouting.
So for people that are like hearing all of this, they're inspired. What are some practical things that they can do to get started on their health journey or to take the next step to optimize? What do you recommend where they start?
I think number one would be to try to upgrade the food quality in your life. So to avoid the ultra processed foods. So these are the foods that typically line our supermarket aisles. And to reach more for single ingredient foods. So beef, fish, chicken, eggs, nuts and seeds, dark leafy greens, whole fruit, things like that. And to learn to cook. Cooking at home is like one of the greatest things that you could do.
I don't cook
You
at
don't
all.
cook at all?
I make my breakfast. I order everything.
That's okay.
I pretty much, I order out, but it's clean. It's healthy.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think just micro changes. It's like, okay, if I have processed foods, maybe one day they can get started on something that's less.
80-20 rule.
Yeah.
But also to cook at home, you don't have to be a Michelin starred chef. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's really, as long as you know how to grill a piece of like chicken breast, I think that goes a long way. Most restaurant food is coated in phantom fats, and those calories add up real quick. I eat out a fair amount. And I'm not even talking fancy restaurants. I love fast casual. I'm a big fast casual guy. But just eating home more during that 4-month period when I was on my cut, I saw fat come off almost effortlessly. And it was a real testament to just the excess phantom calories that you get with any restaurant meal.
Interesting.
You take any meal that you eat at a restaurant and you try to emulate that at home, it's going to be way lower calorie typically.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that I would start with that, like bias yourself more towards minimally processed whole foods, and then start to look at like the protein. Where are you getting your protein from? And try to incrementally increase that, because what we see in the medical literature is that as you incrementally bump up a person's protein intake, they tend to eat less of everything else. And so even just an incremental increase in one's protein intake.
So that'll naturally happen.
Yeah. Yeah, it's called the protein leverage hypothesis. So it's basically we leverage our food environment to get the amino acids that our bodies require to support good health. And so you can actually reverse engineer this by prioritizing protein, which I say all the time, but like, what does that look like? Make protein the star of every meal and every snack. Like, don't even, snack on whole fruits, vegetables, and things like that. Those are all wonderful. But beyond that, if you're hungry, the hard-boiled egg or the Greek yogurt.
Yeah, I love yogurt.
Or a protein shake.
Yeah.
Or cold cuts, right? Like these are all great ways to really put the brakes on hunger in a powerful way. Conversely, foods like granola bars, things like that, they actually increase hunger.
Back in the day when I was broke, I was living off of Power Bars. And I noticed that I had such a gut because it was just not processed, and I felt my health wasn't good, but literally I was living off of protein bars, and that created a lot of belly fat, foggy brain. And I thought I was doing something healthy and cheap and wasn't ideal.
The occasional protein bar is okay, but these foods are really calorie dense. And the other thing about processed foods is that with unprocessed foods, like what we talked about with nuts before, you're not even fully absorbing them because of the whole food matrix. The whole food matrix there's an inherent anti-obesity effect of just eating whole foods. But with a processed food, with like an ultra processed food, you are absorbing 100% of those calories.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, think about nuts, right? When you chew nuts, they've done these studies where they'll give patients nuts essentially to chew. And just before they swallow them, the scientists have them spit out the bolus, right? And they look at the particles, and they're able to ascertain that in the typical transit time that it takes those nuts to pass through the small intestine, that you wouldn't be able to absorb 30% on average of the calories from that bolus. They also do studies where they look at patients that have like ileostomies, where they have like, these stoma bags, and they take out the nut particles, and they see that that 30%, roughly 30% of the calories are undigested. But if you feed somebody, and that's with whole nuts, if you feed somebody these commercially ground nut butters, they're absorbing 100% of the calories.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. Good to know.
Yeah. So it's like the whole food. So you want to opt for whole foods as much as you can.
Yeah.
This applies to nuts. This applies to, maybe there's even a benefit of eating a steak versus a burger. I happen to love burgers and ground beef. I eat it all the time, but
cleaner, less processed.
Yeah, maybe. The chewing, right? Like the chewing of the steak in a way that you don't necessarily do with a burger.
Same with a green drink.
Maybe it stimulates stomach acid to a greater degree, and there's some physiologic benefit of doing that. We don't know. It's just like our tools are so meager, and we are so complex, and we've co-evolved with food over millennia, and we think that we have all the answers. We just don't. So the more you can bias your diet towards minimally processed foods, whole foods, and with a preference for protein, I think, those are the big fish.
Thank you for doing your work to become educated, not only for yourself, but for your mom, and for sharing that in the world, and just having this hunger of curiosity to really dive into the research and find out what helps people live optimally. It's so beautiful to drop in this way. I know we've been friends for a while, but actually to like feel your body of work and just to educate people so they can make more informed choices. And I know that people are going to want to hear and stay connected to you. And I just want to share and make sure that people know where to go so that they can learn more from you and stay connected. Where should they go?
Oh my God, you're so sweet. So I'm pretty active on Instagram at Max Lugavere, MaxLugavere. I host a podcast called The Genius Life. I've got books out. My first book, Genius Foods, is a nutritional care manual for the brain. So if you're interested in nutrition, the brain, dementia prevention, it's a great place to start. And that's pretty much it.
Thanks, Max. Thanks for what you're doing in the world.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for doing this work that changes the world, starting with yourself. It truly does make a difference. And if you're finding value in this podcast, a cost-free way to support us is by leaving an up to 5-star review. It does mean the world to us. And as a thank you gift, we're going to send you one of the most powerful tools that you will ever discover. You're going to get behind the scenes access showing you how to live into your full potential without letting fear hold you back from stepping into your dreams. Just head over to Apple Podcast or Spotify and leave a review now. You can take a screenshot before hitting submit and then go to alyssanobriga.com/podcast to upload it. And make sure to have your automatic downloads turned on wherever you listen so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. I have so much magic I can't wait to share with you. And you can find all this information in the show notes below. But lastly, if you're on Instagram, I love connecting and hearing from you. So come on over and say hello. I'm at alyssanobriga. Thank you again for being here. I cannot wait to share more with you.